Good morning, everyone. It's Marla Copal again today on Tuesday. And here's a thought and a tip for the day. Do you use Facebook like it's a small town street? And let me tell you what I mean. I know that many of us are using Facebook for something more than just our personal experience with our friends. We are looking to connect and possibly do business with people. Possibly is the operative word because our behavior on Facebook needs to be more than just spamming. So let me give you an example. When I grew up, I got whether it was a whatever, it was a delightful experience to grow up in a small town, and I only was aware of that later because I got to walk the streets with my grandfather who owned a business, and he'd introduce me to every farmer or business owner along the street. He did that with all of his grandkids. But we'd always watch the conversations too. They'd talk about family, how was everybody's health, what was going on. And in that conversation, eventually things came out about their business relationship. So maybe one of them had purchased a tractor from my grandfather. Maybe one had purchased a few cattle. Maybe my grandfather purchased a few cattle from them. So it eventually rolled over to business. But my grandfather never ever stuck his hand out and said, "Hey, when are you buying your new tractor?" He may never have ever said, "When are you buying a tractor from me?" So think of Facebook as a small town. How many people are not treating Facebook like a small town where you create an intimate relationship or at least a respectful relationship before you start presenting what it is that you want to offer? So a lot of people are confused with how do you message appropriately to bring people in. I too never really looked at Facebook like it was a small town, but the more I'm owning that it is a small town, my relationships on Facebook are changing. I've learned how to message differently. I've learned how to create friends differently. I've learned how to post differently. And I now share that with everyone else. And Facebook is not as obvious as it could be. I've found multiple pieces of real estate that you can use in Facebook to promote and not look like you're a spammer. So imagine this. You're walking downtown with your mom and your dad, and when you're a small child, did you ever see them shake somebody's hand and say hello, or at church and immediately spout forth the product that they were trying to sell or to pitch? My dad was in sales for 50 years. I don't ever remember my dad doing that. If we got to go with him on a trip, I watched him have a conversation, ask about the family, what was their last trip. He did a whole bunch of engagement before he did it. So I not only had a grandfather show me how to do it, I had my father show me how to do it. And when I got to have a brick and mortar business, I got to do the same things. I'd walk down the street and I'd see my clients, or I'd see someone that I wanted to do business with. I even knew where the rollers and the shakers or the movers and the shakers might have coffee every morning. But I knew that I couldn't just walk in there and introduce myself. I asked around to some of my friends and I said, I really want to talk about some things that are going on in the business community. And I know these guys meet down there for coffee, just like my grandfather used to meet for coffee. But how could I introduce myself to them? And he willingly said, "I'll tell them about you. And why don't you just go down there next Wednesday and pop in on them and introduce yourself and meet them?" So I did. And we all ended up doing some supportive things for the community and what was I needed to have done. But what I'm trying to say here is you have to finesse every relationship. And just because Facebook gives us this barrier of being somewhat anonymous in our world, and in our words and our actions are still judged just like we're walking down a small town street. And if your first expression out is buy this, there's nothing warm there. There's nothing engaging there. They have no reason to connect with you. You just gave them the reason to never engage. So if you're really looking for some fun ways to learn how to build those relationships, post for profits, recruit into your business in a paced, pleasant, polite, and powerful way, I invite you to connect with me because I have an offer coming up here March 15th and that you don't want to miss out on. So remember, connecting on Facebook is the same as connecting in a small town. And if you aren't sure how it's done, then we should probably have a conversation. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.